perspective of maintaining primacy over the globe. You have to remember, when they say no competition, no peer or near peer competitors, they mean Europe also.
Yeah. Yeah, and that 1992 New York Times article, it's almost certain that it was referencing what's now known as the Wolfowitz Doctrine, written by then Undersecretary of State Paul Wolfowitz, a chief neocon, a legendary neocon now in the historical record. But a huge impetus behind that, of course, was after the fall of the Soviet Union. U.S. designs were not to envelop Russia simply as a new friend, a weaker friend, maybe a subservient friend to U.S. interests, but also to create a Russia, or to design a Russia that had no capabilities of rising again in any way, shape, or form to compete with the United States. And that is essentially what has led us to this point. I believe it led us to this point where Russia actually has been able to, in a different way, shape, and form, rise again in the world in terms of influence. And that has led to all of the US's policies of aggression toward Russia. So finally, to close on Ukraine, Brian, lots of talk about nuclear weapons lately, right? So over the last several months, you've had Russia conduct nuclear tests with Belarus on tactical nuclear weapons. You've also had commentary back and forth about, would Russia launch a strategic nuclear weapon to show the West that it has them in order to establish deterrence once again? Because even just recently, as the Biden administration makes its way out, we have talks about renewed nuclear strategy, preparing for a three-front nuclear confrontation with Russia, China, and the DPRK. So, Brian, your final thoughts on how Ukraine has kind of opened up this global or opened up maybe the Pandora's box of this larger agenda globally that we see from the West?
The ultimate irony is the narrative goes, Russia is so desperate and losing so badly that they're going to use nuclear weapons to try to regain control of the conflict, even though we can see it's the exact opposite. And we're hearing about nuclear weapons because the US is saying, well, we did this, we did that, it didn't work. Our enemies are getting stronger. What else do we have? And when you're panicking, what do they always go to? Well, what's more than artillery or long-range missiles? Nuclear weapons. And so that's how we're arriving at this. Russia knows that eventually they will get so desperate, they will either try to intervene directly, or they will resort to something like nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons, maybe, or even strategic nuclear weapons. So they have to be prepared. They have to make it abundantly clear to the collective West that they are ready for this escalation. That's what this is all really about. China building up its own nuclear arsenal. This is solely because they realized that the US would go as far as using nuclear weapons. That is how desperate they are to try to contain, encircle and contain China. And this has been a fear that they've had for a long time. And when you look at the historical records, the US considered using nuclear weapons during the Korean War and also the Vietnam War. And both of those wars were part of a much wider strategy to encircle and contain China. And they had also planned on how to use nuclear weapons to just annihilate China, because they realized that eventually someday China would begin to rise and could potentially surpass the United States and its collective alliance of other captured states. So it really is, it's projection onto Russia, what the collective West is actually thinking about. We're losing. What can we do to try to regain the advantage? Well, we have nuclear weapons.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate